Hi everyone. Oh yeah, I can't turn it around, huh? Let's see if this works. Let's end the video. Okay. So, hi. So, I'm at the campground and I wanted to talk about, I'm gonna try to make this short this time for real. Talk about a little bit why people don't want to go to homeless shelters, because I keep on seeing so many comments on Facebook, and I know that there's probably YouTube videos that kind of go through some of the reasons why people don't want to go into them, but I can't believe how many people don't understand why people don't want to go into shelters. Aside from the dirtiness and the proximity you are to people that are having drug issues and mental health crises and super bad behavioral and criminal problems, aside from even having to deal with those people, there are a lot of shelters that have rules, and I mean, they're way more than rules. But a lot of people sit there and say that people who are homeless don't want to deal with having rules on them. And so they're, fuck ups that just want to fuck up everything in their life and go and live a life with drugs or whatever. And so I had an experience the other night where I was at a warming center, which wasn't a shelter. It's a little bit different. That made me think about how, when people say people don't want to follow the rules, they really don't understand what they're actually talking about. The thing about the homeless shelters is that a lot of these places, their rules are not normal rules within society. They are oppressive and they're very, very abusive. And a lot of these people who are trying to force people into following these very insane rules, they have a lot of really abusive personalities, and it's like it's kind of, I mean, some of them, it's like you're in a prison and the guy's acting like a fucking prison guard. Other ones, and I avoid shelters like the fucking plague. But the few that I've gone into, like when the weather is 20 degrees and I don't have a sleeping bag, the few that I've wound up in, mostly have been very severe, abusive, almost traumatizing situations. I went to the Oak Harbor one for a few days, and that was okay. Like, they were stupid rules, but nobody was being abused. You had to, they didn't have very many stupid rules. Most of their stuff was common sense, except for the fact that you have to go to the shelter at 6 p.m., which means that, you can't really work on your life or work on finding a room to rent if you have to go to a shelter at 6 p.m. because people work who are showing rooms. And so you have to be able to actually go and see those rooms after 6 p.m. and things like that. Other than the fact that you have to go inside at 6 p.m., they actually treat you like normal human beings for the most part. You just, very basic shit. Like, the guys are supposed to be on this side and the females are supposed to be on that side, but nobody has a big problem with it. And it's just, it really wasn't as bad as a lot of these other situations that I've been in. People can have their beds a little bit more spaced out, because the shelter isn't overcrowded. A lot of these shelters, you wind up in these situations where they're A, stationary beds, so they never get cleaned, and B, they're like this far from each other. And not only do you have to come in at 6 p.m., but you have to be like this far from all of the other people that are living in the shelter for 4 hours before you go to bed, and you're not allowed to do anything, right? So you're allowed to just literally sit there. So, but aside from that kind of stuff, what I really wanted to get into was that I was at the warming center in Sequim. And the first two nights that I had gone there, you know, like a month ago or something like that, they were nice people. They were there for the homeless people, to help homeless people. Sorry, I don't know what kind of bird that was. Anyway, they were there mostly because they actually wanted to help homeless people. They were definitely not advocates, and they were not activists, and but they didn't really need to be, because they put out food that was edible. Okay, that's a very big thing with shelters, is most shelters do not give you food that's edible. But this warming center, when I had first gone, they had put out food that you would find in someone's house. And so it was edible, even though it was, you know, things like chili that was cheap or whatever, but it was like not the gross shit that you usually get at shelters. They were helping out. They had a whole bunch of stuff out to help people survive the cold weather. They had warm blankets, which is not something the shelters normally have. Most of the shelters you go to, if you try to get blankets or sleeping bags or tents from them, they give you garbage. And they'll give you, you know, it'll be 22 degrees outside, and they'll give you a sheet or one of those emergency blankets, like as if we're gonna live. So anyway, this warming center, it had like actual help. And then the second night that I was there for a few hours, they had mentioned that they needed to bring some guy in to change things so that he could run it. And I knew right away, just by the way they were talking, there was something wrong. And so I had kind of forgotten about it, and I had to go in there, not last night, but the night before. I slept here last night. But the night before, I didn't have any blankets and no sleeping bag. And I was expecting my tent to come in the mail. It's back there. It's a piece of shit. The one that came in the mail is a piece of shit. And I have to return it. It's not waterproof, even though it says it is. And that's a whole nother story. So I had come back, and I know this story is getting really long. I had come back, and the guy that was running the place, the new guy, no food out. The food he was offering was shelter quality food. Powdered milk, okay? Couldn't even be bothered to buy real milk for people. Powdered milk. Because that's what homeless people are worth. And he was an absolute power hungry, just had this really abusive personality to him. And the whole entire, not only, and when I first went there, the first few times I went there, there weren't any tweakers that came into the warming center. When this guy started running it, all of a sudden, I was the only person there that wasn't a fucking tweaker. Seriously. And so, and not only that, but I wanted to talk about how, these people that are really abusive that run these shelters, because he runs the one in, I guess he's employed, and he was getting paid and he was getting paid in Port Townsend. I guess he's helping run the one in Port Townsend. And the rules that they have and the kind of paperwork they make people sign is, it's horrible. It's extremely oppressive, very, 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 very degrading. They act like you're not a human being. They make you come in at 5 p.m. and you're kind of cattled into a small, tiny little space in a basement. And you're treated like absolute garbage. And so I should get into actually some of these actual rules so you understand what some of the people, what people have to go through in these shelters and the kind of abuse that you have to go through in these shelters. This dude, he believes that all homeless people are absolute pieces of garbage. He thinks that he's better than everybody. And I mean, I personally will say that drug addicts are pieces of garbage, and I probably say that often, but I also don't I don't go around beating my chest and like trying to oppress everybody, you know, like over it. One of the big things that struck me last night, and I stayed totally calm last night, I didn't say anything, but one of the big things that struck me last night was that you're not supposed to sleep in the warming center. I was sitting there on my phone trying to stay awake at 2:30 a.m. and I must have kind of slipped because I woke up where my hands were like this. I don't know if you can see. My hands were down like this, and I was kind of looking at my phone, but I was kind of like passed out like this. And I had pulled myself awake because I knew that I wasn't supposed to be sleeping. So I probably looked kind of weird when I was pulling myself awake because I was like, I actually literally pulled myself awake. And went back to my phone to try to like keep myself awake because the previous night I had only slept probably 3 hours, and I was trying to pull this overnighter because I didn't have any blankets to go outside, and it was like 28 degrees outside. And so, and I knew I was gonna get in trouble and get kicked out if I stayed asleep. So that's why I pulled myself out of it. And I didn't say anything, I didn't do anything, I didn't have any super crazy movements. I just kind of pulled myself up. And as soon as I woke up, he turned to the new guy, and he was like, okay, so if someone like her just woke up and just started beating you up and just lunged at you and started punching you, then you're supposed to call the cops. And I was like, dude, am I in the room of with a schizophrenic right now? Like, that dude is paranoid, delusional, man. And so, and he had this behavior like the whole entire night where he was saying that kinds of stuff where it's like he was like totally freaking psychologically like paranoid of people just because they're homeless. And the thing about people that are that paranoid is that usually what happens, especially with his like sort of abusive personality, usually what happens is he feels like he needs to throw the first punch. Because I actually know what people who start getting paranoid like that act like, especially when they're like drunk or something. I know I've dealt with a lot of abusive people and abusive personalities. And so this is the kind of reason why people don't want to be at the shelters, because the ones that are run by the type of people he is, it gets dangerous. Even the people running the shelter are dangerous. And And then those type of people, they scare off all the good people, because the good people aren't going to fucking deal with his shit. The people that know what abusive behavior is and know that it's unhealthy, they're going to hightail it and stay away from the shelter. And then what's going to happen is all the people that are unhealthy and all the people that are on drugs and all the people that are tweaking are going to come into the shelter and fill the shelter up, because there's bed spaces, because none of the healthy people are going to stay there. As far as the rules go, some rules, other than having to come in at 5 p.m. when you're an adult and you're trying to find a place to live, and you're trying to work and you're trying to do things like that, there's also rules where you have to fill out paperwork, you have to give them your social security number, you have to tell them, you have to go into databases where they actually log in which shelters everybody's been at so that they can come after your ass later. And they also, some shelters, like the Bellingham one, actually, they take your social security number. You can't stay there if you don't give them your social security number, your ID and everything, and they put you in a database, and they send that database to the police, so that if the police deal with you within the next, 5 years, even if you get a house, even if you're renting again, if the police deal with you, they automatically assume that you're on drugs or a piece of trash, because now you're in this database that's with the police also. So you have to give identifying information as a rule. You have to, and it's one thing if you're checking for warrants or something, but it's totally different when they keep you on a list. Another thing about the rules is that not only can you not, a lot of these places you can't speak to people that are of the opposite sex because they treat you like you're all five, but you can all, because it's kind of understandable with some of that stuff, but not really. The other stuff is I think the big one is the curfew. When you're 40 years old, going in at 5 p.m. at night while you're trying to get out of homelessness is fucking, it's insanity. It is absolutely insane, and it is unexcusable. But you also have to deal with these people's abuse. That's actually a rule in a lot of these shelters, is that you have to deal with these people's abuse without talking back to them like you're a 5-year-old dealing with an abusive parent. You can't, most of these places you cannot go outside and come back in the shelter. So if you need to take a break from the abuse, you can't leave for 5 minutes, cool down, and come back in. You can't, some of these places don't allow you to bring your own food or drink in, which means that you're stuck with their unedible, expired garbage food. Some of these places have rules that are, what else is there other than, the big one is the curfew, though. The really, really big one is the curfew. What else was going on in the warming center? I feel like there was something. I don't know. I guess the big thing is dealing with these people who are really, really abusive, who run the shelters. They make a whole bunch of money off of people going into the shelters, and there's so many of them that get attracted to the shelter job because they're very abusive and they're power hungry and they want to try to find someone to oppress. And there aren't a lot of shelters that are being run by people who have more of, I don't know if I'd call it a holistic view, maybe, or just a view of people as human beings first, and Like, I don't even care about the fucking drug addicts and the mentally ill. They can go fuck themselves. Really? Honestly, they can go fuck themselves. I don't care. But as far as, like, when it's obvious that somebody doesn't have those problems and winds up in a shelter, they should really be seen at the very least like human beings. And a lot of these people that run the shelters are, like, really, really abusive. And a lot of women especially that wind up in the shelters are there because they've been abused before. And we don't, and especially when we're in our 30s and 40s and 50s, we don't need to fucking take that shit anymore. A lot of us are really, really, really done with it. And if we didn't care about being abused, chances are we wouldn't be homeless. There are so many abusers out there that would give us free shit. Like, honestly, there are a lot of people that give you, like, all over Craigslist. When you're searching for rooms for rent, there's people all over Craigslist that want to abuse the fuck out of you to give you, like, a cheap $200 room or free room just so they can abuse you or whatever. And you wouldn't even have to deal with the shelter life, right? So it's just, it's fucking bullshit that if somebody has to go inside because it's, like, super fucking cold out, 20 degrees out there, the cops just swept your camp, or somebody just stole your shit, there's no need for the abuse. And I think that a lot of people, they really don't understand the rules that these shelters put on are mostly there as punishment. They are not there to better people or to help people. They're there as punishment for being homeless. And people don't need to be punished for being homeless and having no money. Most of the people that are dealing with homelessness, if they're not heavy drug addicts and if they're not severely mentally ill, because the severely mentally ill should just be locked the fuck up. It should be locked the fuck up, throw away the key so that the homeless shelters don't have to deal with them anymore, the police don't gotta deal with them anymore, you don't gotta deal with them in low-income housing anymore. You know, just fucking throw them away or whatever. I don't fucking care. But, like, the rules that are in these homeless shelters are there to straight up punish people, especially when it comes to things like curfews of, like, 5 p.m. Or really weird shit. I know the guy that was doing the Port Townsend and Swim thing, like, he was saying that people had to come in at 5 because they needed to serve people dinner. Well, why did they need to have everybody eat there at 5 p.m. so bad? You know, you have to ask yourself that. Why do they want to force people to eat that food? What's in that food that they need to force everybody to come back at 5 p.m.? Most shelter food is really, really, really horrible. And it's rare to find shelters that actually give you food that doesn't make you ill, that doesn't have anything wrong with it. So yeah, it's just dealing with the abuse and dealing with the oppression and dealing with people that want to be there to punish you instead of trying to help fix the problem, fix problems that are causing homelessness. A lot of these people that are running these shelters don't even believe that homelessness has to do with things like landlords and the economy, or, you know, the bulk causes of poverty. And if they're not even smart enough to figure out why people are homeless and think that everybody's homeless because they're fuck-ups, then they shouldn't be running the shelters, but right now that's all that's running most shelters, and that's why they're so full of filth instead of people who actually deserve the housing more being able to live indoors and not have to camp outside in 28-degree weather like I am right now. So, I guess that's it. That's a long version, and there's all kinds of other reasons, but it's incredible how people, it's incredible what kind of comments they can come out on, like things like Facebook and stuff, where people are just like really ignorant and just don't even begin to understand. But a lot of that has to do with people not understanding the causes of homelessness, because they don't really get how people wind up with no money.